Here's an example of a really straightforward electrochemical cell in action as a battery. Here's a couple of strips of lead and some dilute sulfuric acid in the beaker, and I've been supplying a voltage for a little while, so in other words charging up the battery for a few minutes. I'll turn this off. I'll take these leads out very carefully so that those two pieces of lead don't come into contact with each other, and let's see what happens when I plug in a lamp. So nice and straightforward. The voltage has dropped off. If I wish to reverse those cell reactions, I can plug back into the power supply here, reverse the cell reactions, recharge the battery, and then allow it to work again. But there's one example of a battery being used to do work. In another example of an electrochemical cell, I've used this thing called a Hofmann voltammeter. Now, a Hofmann voltammeter, when plugged into a power supply, electrolyzes water, splits up water by the action of electrical current into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. And just at the surface of the two platinum electrodes here, some little bubbles, on one side hydrogen, on the other side oxygen. So the power supply is off now. I will unplug those and pop in a voltmeter, a high resistance voltmeter, so that the current doesn't flow between the two. And what I've done is I've just been careful to make sure that there's bubble of hydrogen and bubbles of oxygen on each of those electrodes, so that we have a source of both the hydrogen and the oxygen. And if I plug these into the voltmeter like so, I'll just pop that lead in there and that lead in there, perhaps you can see that this is generating a voltage. And the voltage that it's reading on here is 0.94 volts. Now, I could leave that for a period of time. And that should stay stable as long as there's some hydrogen present and oxygen present. The voltage will stay constant. So unlike the lead acid battery that we saw in a previous clip where the voltage dropped off really quickly, here with the fuel cell, a huge advantage is that if the fuel, in this case the hydrogen, and the oxygen, in this case oxygen, stay present, then the voltage remains constant throughout. And it's still at 0.94 now, even after a few minutes of chatting and with such a tiny quantity.